Do you want to learn how to play rich and full-sounding piano chords, but you don't want to learn a ton of theory to do this? Well, if you want the simplest and fastest path to playing rich and full-sounding chords, then you need to understand my two-shape chord system. With just 2 plug-and-play chord shapes, you can take your piano accompaniment to the next level on almost any song. All right, I'm gonna actually start by showing you these chord shapes, and then I'm gonna walk you through the 5 essential steps that you need to understand before you can start using these shapes in your playing. So the 2 shapes are shape 1, it's a beautiful sounding chord, and shape 2, another beautiful sounding chord. And the amazing thing is that you can use just these 2 chord shapes in your right hand on almost any tune. For example, if you took the tune Amazing Grace, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Well, you can take these 2 chord shapes and play them in your right hand over the left hand bass notes, and they sound amazing. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. All right, so how do you actually do this in your own playing? Well, that's what I'm going to teach you next, but before we do this, if you're enjoying this lesson, please hit the like button, and if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this. All right, so there are 5 essential steps that you really need to understand before you can start using these chords in your playing. So make sure to watch through all 5 steps so that you can successfully use this technique on any song that you want. All right, so step 1 is to learn the shapes. And I did teach you the shapes already, but I did not teach you the formula behind the shapes. And so the formula is that you take the key that you're in. In this case, we're in the key of F major, and you take your major scale and you play the 2nd, the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th, and the 1st note of the scale in your right hand. Now you're going to share the bottom 2 notes with your thumb, or you could play an alternate fingering like this, but my favorite fingering is to use the thumb on these bottom 2 notes. Now that's shape number 1. Shape number 2 has a slightly different formula. And so for this shape, we're going to take the 3rd of the F major scale, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and the root, and you're going to play it like this. All right, step 2 is to apply these chord shapes to your 6 primary chords. These are the chords that you're going to see 99% of the time in popular songs. So these 6 chords are F major, that's the 1 chord, G minor, that's a 2 chord, A minor, it's a 3 chord, B flat major is a 4 chord, C is a 5 chord, and D minor is your 6 chord. So whether you have a tune that goes 1, 5, 6, 4, or maybe you have a tune that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, you can use these 2 chord shapes on any of these chords. All right, next, let's talk about which of these 2 chord shapes you can use over each of these 6 chords. All right, if you're on a 1 chord, an F major, you're going to use shape 1. Pretty simple. If you're on a 2 chord, G minor, you're going to use that shape 2. Doesn't that sound beautiful? Then on a 3 chord, like an A minor, you're going to use shape 1. Beautiful sound. Then on the 4 chord, you're going to use shape 2. Doesn't it sound nice? On the 5 chord, you can use either chord shape. So you can use shape 1 on this chord, or you can use shape 2, kind of depending on the sound that you're after. And then finally on the 6th chord, the D minor, you can use one of 2 chord shapes. You can use 1 or you can use 2. Now, some of you might be thinking, Johnny, this sounds beautiful, but I don't really understand why we're adding these notes. So I want to briefly explain this to you so you have a little deeper understanding of how these chords work and why they sound so good. What we're doing is we're adding notes to our basic chords called chord extensions. And this is what pro musicians do when they take ordinary chord progressions and they make it sound like this. So there are basically 3 chord extensions. If you play an F major chord, the extensions are G, B flat, and D. And we call these notes the 9, 11, and 13, the reason being that chords are stacked typically in thirds. So if we keep going up thirds, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, these are all of the notes that come from the F major scale stacked in thirds, which is the way that we define the notes of the chords. So if you go back to your chord shapes that I taught you earlier, you're actually hitting a lot of these extensions when you play the chords. On the 1 chord F, you're actually playing an F major 9. On the 2 chord, that G minor, you're actually playing a G minor, but you're adding the 11th, the 9th, and the 7th, okay? The 3 chord, okay, what are you playing here? Well, you're actually playing what's called an F major 9 over an A, okay? So it's a lot like an A minor chord, except we're adding the F and the G to the chord, making it an F major 9 over A. On the 4 chord, that B flat, we're actually turning this into a B flat major 9. On the 5 chord, the C chord, we're playing it like this, remember from before? And we're actually turning this chord into an F major 9 by adding these 2 notes to the chords. So it's like an F major 9, except you're putting a C on the bottom. And then there's the alternate way to play the C, which is like this, okay? And this changes the chord a little bit into what's called a C sus4, and then we're adding some beautiful notes on top of that. And then finally, our D chord, remember we played it like this? Okay, for this one, we're adding some chord extensions. So if you play your D minor chord, we're adding a C, E, and G, which makes it a D minor 11. And then the alternate way of playing it is like this. And for this one, it turns it into more of a B flat chord. If you take that D minor on the top and you add B flat and C, it turns it into a B flat major 9 with a D in the bass. Now, if all of this is not making sense to you, don't worry, it will make sense over time. In fact, if you really want to understand this concept, I recommend that you check out our Level 5 Foundations learning track over at pianowithjonny.com. In this learning track, you'll learn everything that you need to know about chord extensions, including which extensions you can use on each type of chord, how to voice the chords, meaning the order of notes, how to use them in chord progressions and on tunes. And then one of my favorite courses is this Play Piano lead sheets with chord extensions. I show you how to use them on the top 8 chord progressions you'll find in lead sheets. So I'll put a link to that learning track below. All right, step 3 is to learn the 2 essential chord inversions for your chord shapes. So for shape number 1, we're gonna have the root on the top. For the second inversion, we're gonna put the 5th on the top. Okay, you see this? So it's all of the same notes, but we're putting the 5th, the C, on the top. So I call this the lower inversion, and I call this the upper inversion. Same for shape 2. Recall earlier, this is our standard shape 2. Well, guess what? We can put the C on the top of this chord, and you have this, okay? Same exact notes, we're just changing the order of notes. So I call this the lower inversion, and this is the upper inversion of shape 2. All right, you're so close to using these rich chord shapes in your playing, but before you do that, you have one more step. And in this step, it's very important to practice your chord shapes as an exercise so that you can really master these chords and feel confident to use them over any chord progression. So there are 2 essential exercises. In the first exercise, you're gonna practice your chord shapes over all of your 6 primary chords in the key of F. And we actually played this earlier. You've got your 1 chord, your 2 chord, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then for the 7, we don't usually play a chord on the E because it makes it like an E diminished. So usually after the 6th chord, you can go back to a 5 chord, and then you can end on your 1 chord, and I like to bring it down like that. I also want to briefly mention that the chord names you're seeing, F, G minor, A minor, B flat major, They're not the technical name of what I'm playing. This is all actually called an F major 9, and this is called G minor 11, but I left these basic chord names here with these kind of cluster chords so you could see how the chord shapes relate back to the original chords. But just FYI, if you saw these beautiful chords in a tune, you'd probably see the chord symbol as the more sophisticated chord, but I left it as the original chord for simplicity so you could see how the chords relate to each other. All right, for exercise 2, we're gonna go to our upper position on our chord shapes and practice these over the bass notes. So we have F, we have G minor, beautiful. Now A, that's our A minor, and then B flat, beautiful. Now the C chord, really lovely, and the D chord. And for the C chord, I actually like to stay here, so we're going to use that alternate chord, and then we go back to F. Now, you could use other inversions of these chords. For example, you could put the third in and play all the chords with, the third on the top. It does get a little tricky, to get all the notes in. So I find using either the root on the top, the F, or the fifth on the top, the C, will give me a lot of options for my accompaniment, but I just want to throw that out there as a side note. You could use other inversions. It just might get a little tricky to fit all the notes in the chord in the right hand. By the way, I wanted to mention that you can download and print the lesson sheet music. You can also change the key of this entire lesson with the click of one button with our smart sheet music, so I'll put a link to that below. All right, congratulations, you made it to the final step. And in step number 5, you're gonna learn how to use these beautiful chord shapes in the tune Amazing Grace. So first, let's play it the standard way. These are the basic chords that you might see in a lead sheet, and then I'm gonna teach you how to use the chord shapes. So you might start with an F chord, Amazing Grace, maybe an A minor, okay? And then B flat, how sweet. Here you might go to an A minor, the sound. Then maybe to a D minor, that's saved, and then maybe a G minor, a wretch, and then maybe a C major, like me, okay? And now back to F, I once was A minor, lost, now B flat major, but now am, back to A minor, found, was blind, there's my D minor, but now there's our C, and then maybe back to F, I see. So how do you play this with the chord shapes? Well, I'll play it for you and then I'll break it down so you know exactly what I'm doing. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. So I'm basically starting on shape 1, amazing, and then on the A minor, grace. We're gonna go to shape 1 right here, and I'm gonna do kind of an inversion of this chord. So I'm adding some chord tones in my left hand. I'm gonna do a little melody there, E to F. How sweet. This is that B flat chord. This is gonna be shape 2 again. How sweet the, adding a little melody in there. And then sound, sound. This is that shape 1 again, okay? And this is over the A. Then we have that saved, that's shape 1 again. Saved, little melody, a wretch. There's shape 2 with the F on top, like me. Shape 2 again on the C, and I'm gonna play a little melody using chord tones from that chord, okay? Then we have I once was, and I brought this up to make it a little softer and a little more tender, and so that's something you can do. This is shape 1. I once was lost. We're down to shape 1, and then check this out. But now am This is shape 2, and we're actually using an inversion of a B flat major chord. And recall earlier when we played this chord, we just played a normal B flat major chord. So you can use inversions of the original chords. In this case, I use a B flat over D sound. But now am found. Look at this chord. This is my shape 1 chord. Before it was an A minor, but I'm using like an inversion of A minor, okay? So you can think of this like an A minor inversion where we're putting the 3rd on the bottom, but we're using that shape 1 chord shape on top of that inversion. And you get a really nice sound. Listen to this once more. But now I'm found. You get that little bass motion. Bum, bum, which is really nice. And then check out the end. Was blind, but now oh, this is gorgeous. What I'm doing here is I'm actually re-harmonizing the chord progression itself. So I'm actually changing the original chords, which is something that you can do. So I'm doing like a G minor, was blind, and then A minor, but, and then B flat, now, and then C, I, but I'm using the chord shapes. So I have was blind, that's the G chord, but there's the A chord, now there's the B flat chord, and then on the C, I keep that chord shape in my right hand, and then for the last 3 chords, I do another reharmonization on the last note C. So we have now I see. We go to a beautiful D flat chord, got some chord extensions, little G flat chord. Again, we're using these beautiful chord shapes, and then we end on a beautiful F chord, that's shape 1, and I put a little button at the end. Hey, thanks for watching, and I encourage you to try these chord shapes on other chords. Try some of your favorite chord progressions and songs. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments. And also be sure to check out pianowithjonny.com, where you will learn everything you need to know about the piano with our step-by-step courses, learning events, and community. I'll see you in the next video.